Welcome to KANISHKA. Today, we will have a orientation program for PSIR optional. When we say PSIR, majority of the students know, at least those who are serious aspirants, it is one of the optional offered by the Union Public Service Commission. PSIR stands for Political Science and International Relations. It is no surprise that many students prefer this optional in particular. In the very recent past, we have seen the topper having chosen PSIR as one of the optional. Majority of the students are not from humanities background. Most of them are from engineering graduation. But still, they choose political science. So why? The first question comes, why anyone should choose political science as an optional? What are the advantages? Because every optional comes with equal disadvantages. It is not that every optional has the advantage. For example, if you look at some of the other optionals that are very popular, like anthropology. If a student chooses anthropology, one major reason for choosing is limited syllabus. Anthropology comes with a very limited syllabus, and most think that it is easy to score. If you set aside physical anthropology, social anthropology in fact helps in identifying the origins of family, origins of caste, origins of jati, origins of marriage. Likewise, it appears to be very simplistic. But anthropology does not help in the preparation for the other general studies paper. For example, apart from the optional, many students are aware that we have a general essay followed by GS1 dealing with history, geography and social issues, GS2 dealing with the constitution, governance and international politics, GS3 primarily focused on economics, science and technology, internal security, and GS4 is a later addition which replaced the second optional, because GS4 tries to promote the ethics in administration, because ethics in administration has become very popular post second ARC, second Administrative Reforms Commission, which recommended to promote ethical governance. So ethics is the concluding part of the GS series, where you have essay, GS1, GS2, GS3, GS4. Political science as such, in fact, deals more with ethical way of life than politics, even though the title identifies itself as political science. But when you look at what political stands for, political in fact highlight how a citizen should be part of a collective. Because political itself signifies a collective way of life. So any individual who is part of a collective way of life, how he should adjust or accommodate in the collective life. So wherever there is adjustment or accommodation, it always comes with some sort of a ethical way of life. Because without ethics, probably you cannot have a collective way of life. So ethics help in terms of shaping our collective way of life. So ethics in a way promote a shared way of life, collective way of life and a shared way of life, right? This is where ethics has become so significant. So that is the reason why the origin of political theory, the father of political theory or the father of political philosophy, as rightly recognized in the Greek thought. Socrates, who is identified as the father, he focused more on ethics rather than politics. How to promote an ethical way of life had been the focus of attention in the writings of Socrates and Plato. Even Aristotle, for that matter, he tried to promote Nicomachean ethics. So ethics appeared to be central to political theory as in its origin. So that is the reason why when we talk about ethics as a GS paper, having understanding of political science is key to unlock the the ethical way of life or ethical governance. Because ethical governance, as I said, cannot ignore the collective way of life, right? So ethics becomes relatively easy to understand because of the understanding of the political science. Similarly, when you look at paper 3, economics, internal security, science and technology. When you look at economics, economics remained identified mostly as political economy. Economics as a subject only developed with the rise of neoclassical economics, particularly in the writings of Alfred Marshall. Prior to Alfred Marshall, when economics as a discipline began, it mostly identified as political economy in the writings of Adam Smith, David Ricardo. Only with the rise of neoclassical economics, the particular emphasis began towards microeconomics, particularly towards utilitarianism. And that is how marginal or marginalism, more than utilitarianism, it is marginal. The idea of marginal appeared to dominate the neoclassical thinking. But thereafter, with John Maynard Keynes' thesis on macroeconomics, it is again the reinvention of political. Because economy cannot survive on its own as in the classical sense, because classical theory always believed that supply creates its own demand. This is a very popular argument proposed by J.B. Say. It is popular as J.B. Say law, which believes that supply creates its own demand. That means there is an invisible hand governing the economy. So the classical economists believed that there is no intervention of state into the economy. So state should stay away from intervening into the market. That is the understanding the classical economics identified. But subsequently with John Maynard Keynes, who proposed this the employment theory creation primarily post the Great Depression of 1929. So post 1929, state intervention to maintain or to manage macroeconomy has become very essential. And that is the reason why today state and market remain inseparable, because state helps in terms of maintaining or managing inflation, which is essential for the economic growth and prosperity, right? So state intervenes to maintain the supply of money. This is another very important dimension. So the monetary policies and the fiscal policies are more or less maintained by the state, either directly or through an independent regulator like Reserve Bank of India. So state intervention into economy, that means nothing but reviving the political economy spirit. Similarly, when you look at internal security, the major challenge to internal security today is the three aspects primarily identified. One is ethnicity. This is a major aspect for the ongoing struggle in Manipur today, which is posing a challenge to internal security. Apart from ethnicity, the second major challenge to the internal security dimension had come from the left-wing extremism. Left-wing extremism primarily targeted the socio-economic conditions, particularly of the Adivasis and the downtrodden in the Indian society. So for some time they dominated the Red Corridor stretching from the foothills of Nepal to North Telangana. So left-wing extremism is another major challenge, even though it is not based on any ethnicity, but it is definitely grounded in socio-economic parameters. So similarly, even regional aspirations to some extent may also lead to challenging the internal security. And apart from this, we have other parameters like communalism or linguistic identities, which may not always pose a challenge, but definitely it is a challenge to internal security of a state. So how state can maintain the internal security. This is another key dimension in understanding. So following communalism to left-wing extremism, that means following from right-wing to left-wing, there are major challenges that are part of the existence of a state. And paper 2 in particular, it focuses on how to establish rule of law. Rule of law is central to political existence. Rule of law. So when we highlight rule of law, what rule of law stands for? Rule of law is distinctly different from rule by men. Possibly in the past, when we look at the Mughal Empire or the British Empire, It was not the rule of law. Rule of law guarantees that everyone is treated equal before the law. Equality before law is one of the essential ingredients of rule of law. So, rule of law does not discriminate. Rule of law does not show any favoritism. So, once you have rule of law in place, it ensures that everyone is treated with equal dignity, everyone is treated with equal respect, and everyone is treated with equal status, and everyone is treated with equal opportunities. So, rule of law is essential for modern society. Possibly in the past, we did not experience rule of law. But in the present, no society can possibly exist without rule of law. So, to establish rule of law, we have a constitution. So, constitution guaranteed the rule of law. So, rule of law is guaranteed through the various institutions that are part of the constitution. So, constitution identified the law making, the law implementation, and the law interpretation through three various institutions: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. So, by maintaining separation between legislature, executive, and judiciary in terms of their functioning, the constitution guaranteed rule of law. So, without rule of law, political community possibly do not exist without maintaining peace and tranquility. Peace and tranquility can be guaranteed if rule of law is implemented. So, the constitution as an edifice created the institutions which help in terms of maintaining or promoting rule of law. And rule of law is only one dimension of political life. The second dimension of political life majorly deals with governance. So, what is governance? What is governance means the effective way of reaching out. Government reaching out to the society. So, there are two major parts as far as governance is concerned. We need good governance for service delivery. Service delivery in the sense, for example, education and health are part of service delivery. It is the duty of the state. It is the duty of the state to provide you with quality education and quality health. So, they are part of the services extended by the state. State extends security, state extends welfare, state helps in development, but among all these things, the most essential element that state is identified is with service. Service in particular, health and education. Health keeps you fit, education helps you to develop your own conception of good life. What you want to become in life is guaranteed through quality education. So, both are essential. In fact, J.S. Mill argues education helps in terms of developing individuality. So, what is individuality means? Where individuals have the freedom to choose. Freedom of choice is where individuality is, as argued by J.S. Mill. So, when you look at these dimensions, that means governance comes with one dimension of governance is service delivery. The other dimension of governance is grievance redressal. If there is a quality in service delivery, then governance should also address the other dimension, that is grievance redressal. So, whatever grievances the people have, that should find a solution. So, the governance includes various institutions like judiciary, various institutions like NHRC, various institutions like National Commissions for Scheduled Castes, Scheduled Tribes, Backward Caste Commissions, Minorities, Women, Child. All these commissions primarily focus on grievance redressal. So, one side the governance helps in terms of reaching out to the people through service delivery. On the other side, governance also helps in terms of promoting or resolving grievances. So, grievance redressal and service delivery are essential ingredients of any governance. And the third dimension that is part of the GS paper 2 is international politics. So, international politics is a very relatively new subject. International relations was not primed to be a major subject prior to the Second World War. Post Second World War, international relations has evolved into a subject on its own. Otherwise, international relations was only studied as part of the political science. So, post Second World War, with the rise of Cold War in particular, international relations are more shaped by external factors than the domestic factors. So, domestic and external factors combine to shape international politics, right. So, the idea of sovereignty which is a modern invention as the characteristic feature of the state, territory and sovereignty, because sovereignty cannot be exercised without a given territory. Sovereignty is always identified within a given territory. So, territory and sovereignty are combined to identify the nation state. So, sovereignty and how to protect the sovereignty among the committee of nations. Committee means with respect to external relations that identifies the international politics. So, what sort of politics that we should undertake in terms of protecting not only our sovereignty, but also in terms of safeguarding and promoting the national interest. National interest, because national interest is very dynamic, it keeps changing. So, national interest, national power, they are all constituent element in the study of international politics. And paper 1, GS paper 1, it deals with the history and the geography. When you look at history, the history is nothing but the human history. Probably when the man started using his mind, that is what is recorded as the human history. So, the origin begins with the invention of fire, probably because human mind helped in inventing the fire. So, thereafter it is human history which is recorded. But as far as GS paper 1 is concerned, even history is divided into 3: ancient, medieval and modern. And majority of the questions vary, because this is where some unpredictability is there. Sometimes the question mostly comes from modern India, sometimes from ancient India. And as an unpredictable thing, certain times even questions are raised from medieval India. So, this is one dimension. But irrespective of the dimension, even in modern India, there are certain political questions that frequently appear, because modern India mostly deals with India's freedom struggle. So, India's freedom struggle is linked to India's political framework. So, there are questions. There are questions at least to the extent of maybe 50 marks, even from GS paper 1, particularly with respect to modern Indian history. So, likewise, the political science as a paper, as an optional, not only help you to understand the political life in particular, but it also throws light in a nuanced understanding, in a new way of understanding even GS paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, paper 4. And even essay for that matter. If you look at carefully the essay questions, there are three questions that are asked, and every candidate is expected to answer at least one question from two groups. So, here also a political understanding gives a new insight even in the essay, general essay answer writing. So, that is one of the reasons why PSIR is one of the chosen optional for many students, aspirants preparing for UPSC. Now, if you have any doubts, you can please ask with respect to this brief orientation that we had with respect to the subject PSIR.
Sir, how should a beginner start preparing for PSIR option?
Good question, beginner, because everyone is a beginner. Even those who have come with PSIR graduation, as far as UPSC is concerned, this is a new beginning. New beginning because you are not focusing mostly on the academic orientation, because academic orientation mostly deals with the debates, the ongoing debates, whereas PSIR preparation is restricted or limited only with respect to the application of the concepts, because of the space constraint as well, because you are not expected to be an expert on the subject, but at the same time, even though you don't have an in-depth understanding of the subject, but what is expected is a wider understanding. A wider understanding means at least you should know what a concept is and how to apply it. Application of the concept is more important. And for this to happen, the best way to understand is focusing in terms of grasping things in a simplistic way. So, political science as a beginner, mostly you can focus in terms of learning from your own experience. Because everyone is part of a political life. The moment you step out of your family life, you are engaged into a political life. So, politics is deeply engaged with competition, because everyone is struggling to compete. That is also part of your political life. So, how you understand political or politics is matters. So it does not definitely need an academic perspective, but even as a layman, if you can understand what a political life is. Because in political life, you are always in competition. There are competing interests and conflicting claims, but the resources remain very limited or scarce. Because of the scarcity of the resources, politics has to regulate the human life. Because not everyone stands to gain from the resources. This is where the rule of law, this is what we try to highlight. Rule of law helps in terms of resolving or reconciliation. Reconciliation is a better word to use than resolving. Got it? So basically, it does not need any expertise to understand this paper, but even a limited understanding of the paper will help in terms of. But what matters mostly is not the in-depth understanding of a concept, but the application of the concept.